Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome back, everybody. Guest today, Stacey and Adam Bessler. Guys, please tell us where you're calling in from and what you do for a living with Minnesela Meats.
We are calling from St. Ange, South Dakota, which is about 10 miles from Spearfish, South Dakota. Lots of people know where Spearfish is. And Adam and I are owners and operator of Minnesela Meats.
That's amazing. Are you guys first generation with this farm that you're doing, or was this more of a generational thing for your families? Or
So grew up ranching my whole life. Grandpa, started building the ranch from the ground up. The meat side of the business, Stacey and I are the first generation of starting the meat company.
That's awesome. I love that. And one thing I guess I want to ask, only because I've had a few, I actually had another rancher on just yesterday, and they were kind of making this big change in their business, the pushing more into like direct to consumer, doing kind of subscription ordering and things like that. Is that kind of where you guys have taken over? Are you kind of trying to get into that space more as well, or are you still kind of more retail focused here in 2024? Just curious.
So we've been doing this almost 8 years. And when we started, it was just obviously the love for the ranch for the both of us. We started raising roping cattle, so Coriani steers. So that was kind of our thing. And then as we started raising those, we started doing a buyback program with our customers that were buying our roping cattle. So when the cattle would get too large to rope, we'd buy them back and then we'd fatten them. And as that grew, we had more and more and more customers looking for quarters and halves and wholes. And then Adam really fell in love with the Akaushi, which is a red Wagyu brand. But that's what we really specialize in. And so over the last 7 years, we have perfected the feed ration on them to make it super consistent. So we've always really believed in pushing consumer from ranch. We're big supporters of anybody that raises any kind of produce or livestock or anything. And this last year, we've really pushed on the USDA inspection. So now we are USDA certified and we can ship nationwide. And so we do everything from quarters and halves to wholes to individual retail cut. We're in a couple of restaurants. It's just more to us about education for the consumers so they understand that just because there's a little label on it that says it's from the US, it's 90% of the time not. So we want people to know what's in their food and where they're getting it and help support local ranchers and farmers so they can make a living.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I think a lot of the ranchers and farmers are looking to do more direct to consumer, because I think consumers are looking to do that more for themselves. Like they want to know where it's coming from, that it's being raised one ethically, but also healthy and without all of the steroids and all the crazy vaccines and all that kind of stuff. So can you tell me a little bit about, your raising process and what makes you a little bit different than maybe like a mass, distributor? What's better about the meat that you're producing than maybe something you might find on a random grocery store shelf that people are used to?
So that's kind of why we went with the Akaushi, the red Wagyu, and crossing it with the Coriani. It's a Spanish breed, used more for sport cattle, but have to have our own little niche to make us different than everybody. Everybody has Black Angus, Black Angus is marketed very heavy around the United States and around the world. And so to have our little niche, we studied to be a little bit different with this Akaushi, and we cross it with our Angus as well. So I guess with us being a little bit different than anybody, we get to calve out the cows, see the from birth to finish, I guess, on the ranch, and we get to see it, hitting the plates. That's the best part for us, is just hearing it from the customers on how happy they are with the product. And like Stacey said, a lot of it's just the educating a lot of people. And I guess if there was one good thing that came out of COVID, that's where when we seen our big growth, is a lot of people wanted to experience the produce straight from the rancher or the farmer. And we've seen a big education from that point on.
What kind of vehicles are you using, like, in order to, provide this kind of education to people? When you ship something to somebody, does it come with kind of like a, letter, like some like an informative content in there, or are you utilizing like social media to do some of that stuff? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So I think that's probably my biggest thing with all of our customers, whether it's our restaurant customers or anything, is that they are educated. I spend a lot of time. I would rather answer 150 questions from somebody and take the time to get them to know. And we invite people to come and check out the ranch and do a walkthrough with them and to see our process. I mean, I've had consumers and customers come and actually help us do calving in the evenings and kind of be part of it.
Cool.
If they want to, bottle feed the babies if they want to. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of information about what we do online that people can read, but to us, it's not just about making a dollar. It's about education and then making a friend and being able to help them through the process each and every single time. So that way they feel confident and comfortable coming back and ordering from us each time.
Yeah, that's definitely something I find in other conversations I've had too, is in this business direct to consumer, these like the kind of larger quantities of meat, the recurring business is the most important thing. And doing D2C is some of the best ways to, forge those relationships. Because I feel like just the labeling and the general kind of messaging and marketing that you see and things you find at the grocery store, I mean, like I go, it all looks the same to me. Maybe if I knew where to look, maybe I would know better. But being able to do this D2C and have this like actual open line of communication with your customers that's what makes it so valuable, right? So where do you find, I guess, where you're doing like shipments to people, do you find that it's mostly local, or are you really shipping like pretty much everywhere all across the country?
Yeah, and we obviously do a lot of local and a lot, in the Northern Black Hills here.
Mm-hmm.
But we've shipped as far as New Jersey, Arizona,
wow.
Texas. I mean, so our name is getting out there, and it does help a lot with the Akaushi, with the niche. And then about 8 months ago, we started producing with our beef, all beef bratwurst and all beef bacon. And so we kind of have some different items out there that people are really starting to fall in love with for convenience snacks that aren't shelf stable because we don't have all the extra crap in it. So people are really
preservatives and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because you get the taste and then you get the health benefits with it as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess I'm just curious, with something like this, how does somebody from New Jersey, come across you guys? Clearly advertising out there somewhere for somebody to find you from that far from where you are. So what kind of like marketing channels are you utilizing online to drive the, D2C business? Being on like social media, you doing any kind of paid advertising? What's kind of been working well for you guys?
I haven't dipped into any of the paid advertising. Everything has been 100% organic. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that word of mouth is either your best or your worst advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
So we do ask for a lot of referrals and we do ask for a lot of reviews. We ask for people just to give us a chance. So a lot of it's that way. And then just in the last year, our following on Facebook went from about 2,000 people to a little over 6,000 people now, just in the last year. So that's really helped.
Yeah, I think
awesome.
Stacey's a pusher. She's a marketer, that's her passion, I think. And plus we have the Sturgis Rally that in our area. So we have people all over the country that come to the Sturgis Rally, and we have booths set up, throughout the rally locations. So we meet a lot of people through that process as well.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm so glad to hear, like, it's actually quite recent, even just like really in 2024, maybe the latter half of 2023, people really getting back to doing these kinds of events, because it's so valuable for brands like yours to really like make like sincere connections that way. So that's super cool. Obviously, there's like, Expo West, Expo East, and all those kinds of things. So that sounds really cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about what other things are kind of going on there?
So it's a motorcycle rally that's been going on for I think it's been going on for it's either 80 or 90 years, but it's been going on forever and ever. And so a bunch of the motorcycles come and they meet in Sturgis, but it's kind of grown to Spearfish and Rapid and Devil's Tower, and people come and just kind of tour the Black Hills. And so we do little pop-up events. So we'll be one place one day and we'll be giving out samples and meeting people and shaking their hands and just answering questions. And it all goes back to the whole education thing. Even if they don't buy anything from us, it's okay. They'll listen and they'll ask questions, which is really cool because there's a lot of people from around the world that come that have never even like seen a real life cow or a real life horse or anything. And so it gives them the opportunity to ask the questions that maybe they've been too scared to ask, because we're very open-minded and everybody comes from different cultures and different backgrounds. And so we really, I think that's my favorite thing, is like getting to know different people from all over and helping them understand why we do what we do, but then also hearing their stories and where they come from and how they grew up. And it definitely, the Sturgis Rally is a huge marketing for us as far as just meeting a lot of cool people.
Yeah. And it sounds like a great time. Then
it is a good time. We enjoy
it does. It sounds like it. It's really cool. So I guess let me ask you this, just only because I'm not like super personally familiar with maybe some of this information, but I know you mentioned, you obviously want to share your story of like what you're trying to do with this brand, right? It's kind of the biggest like main problems that you find with like maybe your more typical like meat vendor that you'll find in like a grocery store or something. What do you kind of tell people when they ask, like, what are the benefits of, what you're selling versus what I can just go out and buy from, like, the Walmart shelves or something?
Yeah, that's another question for Stacey too. She also, she obviously markets everything, but another thing why we went with the akaushi is because of the health benefits of the internal marbling. And I'll kind of let Stacey, she's the nutritional. I just feed the cattle. I grow them.
He doesn't just feed them. So
that's a good tag team between you two, I think. It's perfect. It's perfect.
It kind of does. As far as, obviously people want to know what you're feeding the cattle. They want to know where it's coming from. You mentioned vaccines and that kind of stuff. So that's obviously the number one thing that people ask us all the time is like, what do you feed them? How much of this? Do you use any vaccines? So it's really cool to be able to say, this is what we use. This is what we don't use. As far as what's in the grocery store, currently right now, 90% of everything that you're going to see in a grocery store is being imported from Australia.
Really? That's actually fascinating to me. I never would have thought that. With how much beef is produced in the U.S.
I know, yeah. And that's what's so crazy. But it's also the only farmers and ranchers are the only people that are told what they can and can't sell their products for by other consumers, because you raise them, you don't have control over what the hay costs, you don't have control over what the corn costs. You have to go off of everything. And by the time you put all that time and energy and money into the cattle, at the end of it, if you can't sell it to a consumer, then you're forced to take it to the sale barn or to a cattle buyer, and then you're forced to pay what they'll give you for them. So it's just really kind of interesting to help people understand what that is. Now, when you walk into a grocery store, if you look at all of the burger, it all looks exactly the same. It's nice and pink. It's nice and bright. Well, there's a reason for that, because not every piece of meat should look exactly the same with the same exact color. But that's just because of the chemicals, and we call it the pink mush that they put into it to make it look nice and bright. And so just helping people understand that you're not always going to get 100% burger just because it says it's hamburger. It doesn't have to be 100% hamburger for the grocery stores to sell it. The akaushi, kind of like Adam said, with the akaushi brand, it does have a higher monostrae fat in it. And so their genetics actually allow their fat to go all the way through the cattle versus just on the outer. So you're not just getting the outer skirt of the fat, it's actually going through the whole entire cattle. So every piece of meat is going to have that nice marbling in it. With the higher fat content in it, it actually acts more like a butter than it does just like the outer, like the Angus just has the regular fat. Right. So when you get, it does make it super tender and super flavorful. So that's what akaushi is really well known for. It is a heart healthy beef. And so it's really cool to be able to educate people on, because you hear all those horror stories like red meat causes cancer and don't eat this if you have this. But it's actually really fun for me to help them understand all of the lies that are out there and help them see the process and why it actually is really good for you.
Where do you think that comes from? I mean, I hear so many things about, red meat is this, and then, there's been a very big, as I'm sure out there on social media, there's been a big kind of like carnivore diet push and all the benefits of eating that way. Obviously, and it's so funny because every time I hear somebody like that, like I wouldn't recommend anybody do it, but like I am experiencing like significant benefits since I've been doing it. What do you kind of think is, I guess, just like the impetus behind this of like these lies and these like fallacies that are out there about red meat? I mean, where's that coming from? Is it like do you think it's like a lobby of something against red meat, or like what do you kind of find in that regard?
I don't want to get into politics, but a lot of it is just
how they control the market.
It is. It's just how they control the market. It's people, they don't want them to get away from the processed foods. They don't want them to, because it's a multi-million-dollar industry. And so they try not to educate people, or they try to make convenience a thing. But if you go back to the very beginning, where God created just produce and just meat, I mean, there's a reason he put everything here. So if it was bad for you, it wouldn't be the only thing that everybody lived on for years and years and years and years.
Yeah, it's so true. I guess, what are some of the most common like misconceptions that you find yourself educating people about when you meet them at events like this, or just like in general, something you would include when somebody buys? Do you give people like a list of like Q&A, like truths and like falsities of what is generally said about red meats?
Yeah, I think the biggest questions that we get are, what's in it? Yeah. What do you feed it? Do you have the antibiotics? And then if we do have the antibiotic on, what do you do with the cattle? How it will affect me? I think one of the biggest things right now, the hurdle, is everybody's on this grass-fed, grass-finished cattle because they're afraid of the grains. And there's so much distruth about feeding cattle grains, how it's going to affect us as a human, because the cattle digest everything just as we do. And so people think, well, if they're eating corn, then we're going to have the GMO in us, which is not. So there's just, again, it just all goes back to education. Is I think one of the hardest things is when people do hear things or get stuck on something, it's really hard for them to get off of that. So I know that's something that we really struggle with. Like we do obviously grain finish our cattle, having them already going in and being like, oh, you have grain in your cattle, we want nothing to do with it. But if you can get them to open up and let them know, like, I'm not trying to say you're wrong, but here are the facts behind it, either gain the customer or you don't. I mean, it's just one of those, all back to education. There are a lot of different questions. I know a lot of people recently have come down to how do you raise them as far as like humanely, where are they kept, how are they born, you know, what happens when it's really cold outside, what do you do for them? So that's where it's really cool to be able to show them pictures or videos, you know, if it's really cold or if we have a sick calf. It's nothing new for our family to my kids to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and have 3 calves running around our house, you know, warming up. That's pretty
awesome.
normal.
That's got to be a great sell for a lot of people, seeing that you keep them inside sometimes. I was picturing a calf with like a big like coat on or something, like cute, like a giant.
We don't go that far.
Oh, we do.
Yeah. No, it's so funny though, because like there's obviously the education standpoint, and then I feel like it's a less like empirical side of things. It's just like people just want to know that like these things are being raised by decent people that are doing the right things, that just have a heart and some compassion. And it just isn't like disgusting, like factory operation that like you see on like, you know, documentaries and stuff like that. Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I guess I'm just curious, you know, obviously, you know, you mentioned it's been 8 years now since you guys kind of took over the food side of the business there at the ranch. You're learning everything you've learned since then, like up to this point. I guess I'll ask each of you this question. You know, if you go back to that time and give yourself one piece of advice, knowing everything you know now, what do you think that piece of advice would be? Business, personal, anything?
Try to take one thing on at a time and conquer that before you move on to the next one. In this business, there's a lot of fires you got to put out, always something coming up, some kind of disaster where you just got to take one day at a time to push on and keep those end goals in your head while you're putting out the fires on why you're doing this. And, you know, what we strive for, I think the most is having people have the best beef eating experience they can and most consistent. So, yeah.
You got to keep yourself present with just taking one thing at a time, but just never forget sight of that, like as the end game while you're dealing with things and having to make decisions, to make sure you're keeping that as the emphasis the whole time. I quite like that advice. I think that's great advice. Anybody, you know, that maybe is in this space that's listening, or maybe is thinking about getting into ranching, or maybe just like selling meats in general, I think it's great advice. So I appreciate that. Stacey, how are you feeling about that?
I have to agree, conquer one thing, but I think any new rancher or anybody that is out there looking to start or is interested in it, ask questions and don't be afraid to, don't think that you have to know it all. Because I mean, we both grew up ranching, we both have a bunch of family, and the whole meat side of it is completely different than just taking your calves to the sale barn at the end of the crop season. So ask questions, and like Adam said, like just remember why you're doing what you do. Because I really do believe that if you have ranching in your blood, like it's a want. You have to want to do it, to go out there when it's negative 20 degrees and feed cattle and wake up every single day. But it's worth it. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I really appreciate that. And I think it's good advice, and it's a good perspective to have. I mean, regardless of what industry you're in, if you're a new entrepreneur or even a more seasoned entrepreneur, maybe off on a new venture you're not used to, just remember, I think remembering your why is a huge thing. Because you know, if you're just thinking about the money and, you know, you're not thinking about, you know, the mission or like where you came from, why you wanted to do this on day one. I think some people can get lost in that and, you know, just worry about the numbers on paper and kind of forget about those things sometimes. So I think that's really good advice. I appreciate that.
We're still working on the money side of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
We're wondering where that part is.
That's funny. You know, what's funny is I say this so often on the podcast, whenever I ask this question, but so many people, when I ask that question, they say, you know, what would you go back and like change and do different? They say, I wouldn't do it. You know? And then obviously they're always like, no, like, of course, like, I would never change anything for the world. I love it. It's my whole life, and I love what I'm doing, and it helps people and all this kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like the knee-jerk reaction with that answer always cracks me up, how often I get that. But, yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah, just keep your job. It's okay. Like, no, but that's awesome. I just want to also just give you guys a quick opportunity to just be able to shout out, you know, your website, any of your social medias, anyway, you know, anybody wants to partner with you guys or just get in touch or maybe even place an order. Just let everybody know how to stay in touch with you guys.
Yeah, so you can find us on Facebook, or you can find us on Instagram at Minnesela Meats. We do have our website up and running. It's www.minneselameats.com. We have our wholesale inquiry forms there, so we do a lot with other business owners, restaurants, convenience stores, general stores, that kind of thing. Yeah, and if anybody's out there there looking for a way to get rid of their Akaushi calves, we're always looking.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you again, guys. Stacey, Adam, you guys are amazing. I love what you're doing. I love your passion for everything. And yeah, I just want to say best of luck and continued success. And we'll definitely be sure to follow up with you. Be interested to see how things are panning out for you guys down the line. So thank you so much again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.